I really like myself. People can't understand how I've been single for all this time and I like my own company. But I do. Yeah. I love it.
So I would never ever wish the years of uncertainty and overthinking and feelings of isolation upon anyone who is navigating their queerness. But at the same time, I do think that there is something magical about the person who comes out at the other end of all of that. And at risk of sounding like super, super cheesy, like already I know that you're rolling your eyes at what I'm about to say, but it's that kind of pressure that I think really makes diamonds. Oh, yeah, I went there, I said it. But go with me on this. One of the best parts of doing Lost Spaces, on doing this show, is getting the chance to speak to people who have reached that place of self-assuredness, who have come out the other end of feeling like they have no idea who they are and where it is they're going. And getting to talk to people that are so confident in who it is they are and that are so certain of the path that they're on is such a gift. It's just such a gift. And I know I say that a lot. I know I say how lucky I am to do the show, but I mean, I really do believe it. But for this week's guest, Jane Postlethwaite, who is a stand-up comedian and host of All the Terrible Things, a paranormal queer comedy podcast, it was a pretty long road. It was a pretty hard journey to follow. In fact, she didn't realize that she was a lesbian until she was well into her 30s. And it was in part thanks to the warm, welcoming audience that she found at the Indigo Club, a comedy night that was held in Brighton, England, that she began to put the pieces together about her true self. My name is Kay Anderson, and this is Lost Spaces, the podcast that is all about the memories we leave behind in lost queer spaces. Let's dive into Jane's story.
Ended up in Brighton in my early 20s. I grew up in Cumbria in the Lake District, and I ended up going to a art school in Winchester where I did not fit in. From being from like a working class northern village, and then having to deal with very posh girls with money. So that was 4 years of hell. And at the end of that 4 years, I was like, I don't really want to come back to the Lake District. And I started a relationship with someone who lived in Brighton and was kind of coming and going from Cumbria to Brighton for a few years. And then we moved in together. I know now, looking back, a lot of my male relationships were kind of a means to an end. Like I wanted to be somewhere, so it was easier to be in a relationship with someone because it's half the rent. Yeah. Just being honest, I've done the work.
But hang on, but that doesn't apply to relationships you've been in with women then, because they can pay half the rent as well.
Exactly. At the time, we're talking 20 years ago, where I had no queer representation growing up. I had nothing to really let me know, oh, this is who you are, or this is who you could be.
Yeah.
So looking back, I know from a little girl, I knew I was different. And I think it was the EastEnders episode, I think it was 1988 or 89, the first ever male gay kiss on TV. Do you remember?
I don't.
EastEnders?
No, sorry.
I remember the whole family were in my nan and granddad's living room, and it was all over the papers. People were outraged, and this kiss, and the word gay came up. And I asked, what does gay mean? And they all laughed. So I immediately felt shame because I was looking at going, that's nice that a man can kiss a man. Maybe a woman could kiss a woman. Like it never, I was like, could that happen? Is that allowed to happen? So all these little thoughts were happening in my childhood brain. And I don't know where I was going with
Oh, no,
that.
you were talking about relationships with men, relationships with women, and how you'd never thought that you had permission to be a lesbian.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, exactly. So 20 years ago, it wasn't, there was a few queer shows or whatever, but I never really felt safe to explore that.
So it's not that you didn't have those feelings and you didn't recognize those feelings. You just didn't act on them or allow
Yeah.
them to develop in your brain.
Yeah. I had my first kiss with a girl when I was 19 at art school.
Well, of course, it was art school, yeah.
And that was amazing. She was from New York. She was incredible. But I felt very shame. I had this shame feeling all the time. And I pushed it all down and pushed down how I felt. And I kind of thought all women think about kissing their friends or kissing other females on TV, don't they? Apparently they don't. So yeah, I had this relationship, moved to Brighton. It wasn't great. Stayed in it for 6 years, was absolutely miserable, loads of mental health problems. I was depressed, I was anxious, I was just not happy. And I know now I was putting on a mask, I was pretending to be something I wasn't, which included being in a straight relationship. And then when I was 29, I think all 29s go for this, like, oh my God, I'm going to be 30. What am I doing with my life? And I was like, I've always wanted to do acting. So I signed up to do a 2-week acting workshop in Brighton with the Academy of Creative Training, shout out. I did a 2-week workshop with them and felt it was where I kind of belonged. And they offered me a place on the diploma. They offered me an audition. So I did the audition. I was thinking, if I get the audition, then I'll think about doing the diploma. Because the diploma was 2 years on top of working full time. And I got through. So I ended up doing this diploma. And then I split up with that boyfriend. And then had a few, I was like, oh, I'm free to kind of date women, maybe.
Question mark?
And then I fell into another male relationship.
Oh, no.
Yeah, with someone else who was on the course as well for 2 years. That went sour about 4 years later, 10 years ago. Yeah, he went off with someone else, which made me feel, it feels bad.
Yeah.
Especially we were planning to maybe have children and move in together. But I joke about it in my stand-up, that how I always had this very high-pitched noise in my brain. And it was only a few years ago when I came out, I was like, oh, it's saying lesbian really loud. Even in that last relationship 10 years ago, where I thought, I want to have kids and settle down, there was something like a high-pitched, in the machinery, there was something that just wasn't right. I felt weird and I just thought it was me. I thought it was because I'm depressed and I've got mental health. Turns out it was my subconscious screaming at me that I was gay. So I came out of that relationship. That was like 2015, 2014, 15. I dated a few women, and a few guys, and was just, it didn't really work out because I hadn't done the work on myself. I'd gone from relationship to relationship, not explored who I was, not explored what was true to me. And I moved out of Brighton in 2017. I was coming and going for a bit because I was running comedy nights and things and doing gigs down there. And then when the pandemic hit, I don't know whether you've had a trend of this, of people coming out in the pandemic, if you know people who have.
Yeah.
So the pandemic was awful, but it was also, after a couple of years, I spent so much time by myself and sitting within myself. And I actually got to like myself. And I was listening to a podcast called Come Out by Mo Welsh, who's a stand-up comedian who I love. And it was talking about signs when you're growing up of what could indicate that you're gay. And it was like tick, tick, tick. Because I always thought I was bisexual as well. So if anyone asked me, I'd say I was bi. And I think my dad kind of knew. I think I'd talked to him about that before. I was like, oh, you fall in love with who you fall in love with. That was the attitude I kind of had. And then I sat there and I listened to this podcast and there was just a moment, and it's like, am I a lesbian? And everything like became full color around me. So, oh my God, I'm a lesbian. And I cried and cried. And when I moved back to Cumbria, I moved back in with my parents. I've got my own space and things, but it was their wedding anniversary day. So they were out. And I'd come to this earth-shattering discovery about myself, and I couldn't tell them till a couple of days after because I didn't want to take the spotlight away from their anniversary. And I remember just thinking how important it was for me to tell my parents. And I was driving back over the moor with my dad. We live in the middle of nowhere in Cumbria. And we stopped. I said, can we stop on the bench for a minute? And just got him out of the car, and I started crying. And he thought it was something really scary. I was going to tell him. I said, I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I actually think I'm gay. And he was just like, well, that's fine. He was like, I did suspect. You had a T-shirt with "The future is female" on it.
Oh, yes. Feminists, always lesbians.
Yeah. And then he said, do you want me to tell Mum? And I was like, yeah, you tell Mum. And I came home, and then I was upstairs for a bit, and I came down, and I said, oh, has he told you? And she said, yeah. And I said, oh, can I have a hug? And she was just like, well, you are turning 40 soon, and you have some very strange ideas when you get to that age. That was her response.
Well, as in, maybe you're not.
Maybe I'm just going through the menopause. I think she was getting at.
Is that how it got its name?
Yeah, the pause in men. But yeah, so it was a few months before my 40th birthday, and I turned 40, and I've never felt so myself and so settled. And I realized everything I'd ran from in my late teens and my 20s and some of my early 30s was everything that made me unique and special and me. Like being from the north and being from a working class background and being gay and,
Okay. So many follow-up questions. The
so
most
many
important
questions.
one. Do you still have the voice in your head screaming the word lesbian constantly?
No.
Oh, that's a shame.
No, it's good. It's settled down. It's calm.
But you need to be reminded, don't you?
It's nice in there now. It's not, I don't need... Oh, so I told my parents, and then I had to tell my nana, my 90-year-old nana, because I was like, I want to start, those things I wanted to share on Instagram.
And your nana's on Instagram?
My aunties, and then they would tell. Or my cousins,
no, okay.
do you know what I mean? Oh, she's posting all this gay content. So it took me 3 months to get the courage to go and tell my nana, my 90-year-old nana. It was quite poetic because it was just meters away from where I'd sat and watched that EastEnders episode.
Aww.
And forgot the shame. And then I kind of shed the shame in the same cottage. And I said, I've got something to tell you. If you know you're going to have questions, you can ask me anything you want. But I just want you to know that I'm gay. And she was just like, oh, okay. Oh, okay. So she's like processing it. And then a neighbor came round just at that moment. So I was like, I'll leave you two. And I walked out of that cottage, and it was just on the moor. And I walked up on the moor, and I've never felt so free. And that voice had gone, the sound had gone. And I felt so light. And I felt, it's like, oh, I can breathe. And it was just such I felt so tall. I felt so, amazing. And then I went back down to her, and we never really mentioned it again. I made jokes about it with her, but yeah.
Yeah. So, excuse my, what's the right word here? Hope I'm not, I'm terrifying you now. All these pauses.
No, poke away, ask any questions.
Just excuse my ignorance with the follow-up questions that I'm asking. Because I'm one of those people who, I didn't always know that I was queer.
Yeah.
But when I knew, I knew. And I didn't have years of struggling with it or not examining it. And so when I meet people who did have that experience, I'm always like, but what was happening? And so I ask these questions not in a way of to shame you or anything, just to understand.
Yeah. Yeah.
What? How?
So obviously I always thought I was bisexual, and the
Oh, okay. So if we go through time then, this
Yeah.
19-year-old you that had the snog with the girl at art school, was that you thinking, oh, I'm bisexual? Or was that like, oh, this is just a new experience?
I think I said to her, I told a friend, I did this thing where it's like, oh, if I was gay, I'd kiss that girl because it was safe. So I think we were at a party or something, and I said, oh, I was telling my friend that if I was gay, I'd totally fancy you. And she just like kissed me. I was like, oh, okay. Which was great. But then I felt I felt so much shame. And I was like, oh, I don't like that feeling.
But okay, and so there's the external things that you were saying. So you were saying to people, if I was gay, I would fancy you. But what were you saying internally? Was it the same dialogue or was it slightly different?
That's a good question. There was an attraction there, but I wasn't aware I was allowed to have it. And there's a thing as well, like listening to Mo's podcast, Come Out, we talk about, do you want to be her or do you want to be with her?
Yeah.
So a lot of women will think, I want to be like her, or I want to be her best friend. And then you're like, oh, actually, I'm attracted to that person romantically, sexually. But you don't realize it at the time because no one said it's okay to feel that way. I can't remember when the L word came out. I think I was in my 20s.
Well, and this is the other thing, because,
Yeah.
you've said that you didn't know that you had permission and you didn't have role models or people to look up to, which, yes, when you're a kid, but then in your 20s, why did the switch not flick?
Because I was in a relationship with
Sorry,
a
I'm sounding
man,
really
so-
interrogative as well here. I'm not trying to...
No, it's fine.
What
It
were you
helps me
doing,
work it out. It's
Jane?
like, this is what I think all the time. What the hell was I doing? How amazing could my 20s have been? I would never, even though I've been through some horrible, horrible times over the last however many years, I can't change anything because that
No,
would
of
change
course,
who I
yeah,
am now. And I really like who I am now. But I was just in a relationship with a man, that, a boy. And I thought that's what you did.
And so when you were in that relationship, did you just suppress all sides of your
Yeah.
sexuality? So even...
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I still found women attractive and, but I just was like, oh, well, I guess that's not me. And the other thing that's quite funny is when I did come out and went to tell friends, I realized how many gay women I have in my life and how many gay couples. So, I'll tell Alice and Hannah. I'll tell Liz and Pam. Oh, they're all gay. I've surrounded myself with lesbian couples and lesbian women who I look up to.
And what was the typical response from them then?
A few of them were like, oh, we kind of suspected, but joy. When a lesbian finds another lesbian's come out, it's joy. Like, welcome, join us.
Now it's time for the ceremonial dance.
Yeah, and then that kind of relates to because we were talking about the queer spaces, and the one I'm going to tell you about, it really relates to that because I was in so many queer spaces or groups or social situations without realizing it because it was more comfortable for me. And I felt more like myself around these women, which I didn't necessarily know at the time. So, yeah.
You didn't consciously know, so you subconsciously knew, and that's why you were putting yourself in those situations.
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Thank you for bringing us to our queer space for today. We're only how long in?
Yes.
15 minutes? If I have been paying attention to the story that you've just told me,
Yeah.
at the time you were in Brighton and at the time you were going to this queer space that we're going to be talking about, you were not out.
I was not out. I had split up with the last serious relationship, the guy who went off with somebody else. So an interesting thing for you as well, which you might want to know more about, is I have been single for 10 years this year.
Ooh.
Which is very...
So if anyone's listening and they fancy getting in touch.
Yeah, and I'm like, why is that? I think it's because I've been getting to know myself and obviously pursuing my dream of having a career in comedy. And I felt like these other relationships, I put the other person on a pedestal and put them first and never put myself first. I think that's from growing up in the 80s. You have to
Yeah.
respect men, and you have to, in a relationship, the man comes first and he's the most important thing. And I'm unpicking that over the last few years. It's like, actually, put yourself first. It's not being selfish. It's my life, and I'm going to go for these things. So I feel like relationships take me off course, and I can't really risk that at this point. I'm sure someone special will come along at some point, but yeah.
Oh, so it's been a conscious decision not to pursue relationships. It's not just been like, oh, it
Yeah.
just happens not to have happened.
So when I split up with my ex, it was like 2014, and early 2015, I dated men and women to test it out, but I knew it wasn't really fair on them because I had so much work to do on myself. And yeah.
I do find it fascinating, this whole myth of the relationship. The myth of the relationship, the cult of the relationship, the whole kind of programming.
Of thinking it's going to fix everything.
Yeah, but the way that we're all conditioned to be like, yes, when you grow up, what is going to happen is you are going to meet someone, you're going to settle down,
Yeah.
you're going to get a mortgage, and you're going to have kids, and then it's going to be happy ever after. And
Then you die.
well, yeah, and then you die. Then you're like, you do DIY projects until you get there.
That doesn't sound too bad to DIY. I like DIY.
But like this whole, I'm not saying anything original when I say this, sorry. Like this way that we are taught that, like that we're not complete, that we have to be in a relationship in order to have fulfilled our role in life, it really fucks you up. And
Yeah.
even if you're not in that state that you've described where you're putting the other person's needs first, you do tend to become like this one unit. This couple is one unit, and so you lose your independence and your
Gives me palpitations.
autonomy.
Like, oh. No
And
thanks.
yeah, it's just so weird that that's what we were all kind of like, yeah, this sounds good, let's go.
Do you know about the document that's sent out to lesbians? Yes, if you come out, they'll be like, have you read the document? And you get emailed a PDF. This is true. And it's a PDF about compulsive heterosexuality and how, as women, we've been groomed to be like the man. It's in Disney. I hate Disney. It's in Disney. I always wondered why I couldn't relate to Disney. And that's why the man will save you. Grow up, have children. That's your life. Like, all of that.
Ugh, yuck.
Ugh. No offense to anyone who's doing that. I hope you're happy. But if you're not happy, look at why you're not happy.
But it's not even heterosexual relationships. It's just been duplicated in other types of relationships as well. Just because that's really all we know, right? Like that's, if we're talking about representation, if you're talking about role models and things, those are the only things that we're shown as being successful. And in TVs and films and blah, 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 all the single people who are of a certain age are ones to be looked down on and felt sorry for.
Well, there's so many lesbian films as well where one of them dies. That's one of the jokes that we have in the community. Can't have anything nice.
Anyway, okay, we've gone off. We've just mini rant there. There will be more, I promise. Some extra
I love it.
rants
I love a
coming.
mini rant.
We're going back to the space. So we're here to talk about the Indigo Club today. And we've just established that when you started going there, you were not out. But what drew you to the place?
So I was single and I'd done my acting diploma and I really loved the comedy roles and I was very suited to the comedy roles. And I came out of that diploma thinking I'm going to be an actress and all this kind of thing. But on paper, I'm not very interesting, like tall, blonde woman in 30s. There's not good roles for that. So I think just before the breakup, I'd done a little bit of stand-up and I really enjoyed that. And then the breakup took 6 months of healing. I was very, very down, the lowest point of my entire life. And healing myself from that, I was advised, lean into things that really make you happy. And comedy made me happy. I didn't want to do stand-up because you have to be vulnerable and talk about your life, and I wasn't quite healed for that. So I wrote comedy characters, and I started writing these comedy characters, and I signed up to do Brighton Fringe Festival, do my own show, and that's what kept me going. That's what kept me, seeing a future. Sounds dramatic, but it did save me. Comedy saved me. And through this comedy scene, there's an amazing comedy scene in Brighton, and you get to know everyone really quick. So the relationship that had gone wrong was not a very healthy relationship. I was taken away from friends and family, and that's a whole other podcast. But
Okay.
yeah, so I started to make friends with lots of people and be like, I am interesting, I am funny. In the comedy scene, there was a lot of female lineups. And Hannah Brackenbury, who ran the Indigo Club, which we're going to talk about, she ran a night and I bumped into her loads of times. She's a musical comedian. She's amazing. And you just end up gigging with the same women and a lot of queer women as well. And what I found was if you invite a lesbian to an event, they will bring at least 6 other people. So my shows were always had so many lesbian fans and followers, and I did the Brighton Fringe in May, just gone, and again, lovely lesbian following. I was like, this feels nice, and it felt safe after being kind of wounded by a man. I just wanted to be around female energy as well.
So it wasn't a cynical ploy to get more people to come to your gigs.
No, that was like an extra little bonus. I didn't realize. Like, this is fantastic and so supportive as well. I found the comedy scene for a woman is a very multi-layered, complicated landscape.
Was that a nice way of saying shit show?
Yeah. It's very misogynistic. I had a few horrible experiences with men who were either in the audience or other male comedians, or being followed home from a gig on the bus, and like weird things. So it felt very safe to do comedy in these female spaces. And obviously, if you're doing a gig with another female, a lot of the times you get the bus together or you get the train together. So yeah.
Okay. So Indigo Club, tell me about the very first night. Do you remember what that was?
I think so, yeah. Yeah. So there wasn't really any spaces for lesbians as such. And a lot of the gay bars in Brighton tend to be touristy,
Yeah.
like stag do, hen do's. They go for the novelty of being around gay people. And I think in Kemp Town there's a few like drag shows and things like that. But yeah, so Hannah Brackenbury, she ran and still runs Funny Girls, which is an all-female lineup. And then she set up Indigo Club. It was a kind of comedy cabaret night of acts. And then after 2 hours, they cleared all the chairs and it became a disco. So lesbian disco. So again, the audience was always full because lesbians bring lesbians. And then we had the disco after. I think she created the space that she wanted to exist, which was lovely, and what I try and do with my comedy. And it was just amazing. So she had all different people doing, like females, doing cabaret, music, sketches, characters, stand-up. So the first time, that was thinking back, I think I did one of the first ones. Yeah, I did one of my comedy characters, and it was someone's birthday, so I made a fuss of them. I did too. I did one of the first ones, and then I did a Halloween one. And I just remember thinking, this is amazing. These are my crowd. Like, I felt so comfortable as a performer. I felt non-threatened. And then the fun bit was like clearing the chairs and then setting up a disco. They did face painting. I face painted up. I'm dancing with people. I'm just living my best life, but not out.
Yeah, okay. So let's explore this a bit more. So when you're a performer, sometimes the performing bit is the less scary bit, and the socializing with people afterwards is terrifying.
Yes.
Does that sound
Yes,
familiar
that's
to you at
true.
all?
Yes, very, very true. And obviously with my characters or my stand-up, I'm quite confident. So when I come off stage, people, or if it's before a gig, people want to socialize and I'm like, I need to kind of get in the zone. And then afterwards, like they think when I used to do comedy characters, they used to think I was the character. So
Oh,
normally I'd do a gig and then get the bus out of there.
oh,
Or it would be uncomfortable because it's such a strange thing. Men would want to straight men want to touch me or like hug me or be like, oh, well done. And they'd like kiss me. And I'm very socially awkward anyway
yeah. Oh, gross.
with hugs and things. So that was always a bit icky. And I didn't have that at Indigo Club.
Well, and so then this first time when the chairs started being pushed away and the disco was starting, do you remember
Yeah.
how that felt?
Yeah, it was almost a bit like when you had a school disco and you cleared the space.
Well, and is that exciting or is that terrifying?
Yeah, it's exciting
Oh,
because I got changed in the green room, got changed, and then came back out, and people were face painting. The lights had changed. There was music. It was just so cool, and it was It was like the bottom venue of the latest bar as well, so it felt like our own little private party. I don't think there was any game. I think it was all lesbians. I think the whole place was lesbian.
and was there a feeling of opportunity in the air?
I think I might have got chatted up a couple of times. I'm just remembering something now.
Ooh,
Yeah. The second time I did it, I might have had a kiss outside with someone.
you might have. That doesn't sound very definitive.
I definitely did. I definitely did.
Ooh, was she like, I really liked your set?
She was just following me around, and then I was sat outside and she came and sat next to me. I think we had a little kiss. Yeah, that's exciting. I'd forgotten about that.
So what does that little kiss mean to the closeted version of Jane?
Yeah, it was pretty exciting because at that time I was dating different people, and I think I still had a little bit of shame around being fully out as a lesbian, which is a shame because I could have had so much fun at that. Yeah, it's interesting. I remember a friend, she was on the opposite side of the road, and she was like, afterwards, she was like, I was watching you. Very good technique or something. She said.
Are you still friends with this person? Am I allowed to say that's a bit creepy?
I know. She's called Charlie, she won't mind me saying. Because I think she didn't know whether I was a straight person just trying it out for the first time or something. I think lesbians can be very cautious of straight women
Okay.
wanting to try something new, Katy Perry,
Yeah.
I Kissed a Girl and all of that kind of thing. So they were like, where does she lie?
Ooh.
Yeah.
Ooh. So then jumping forward a bit, when you did get to the point where you were like, yes, I am a lesbian, like, were you worried that any lesbians would be like, are you really?
No.
Oh, okay.
I think a few of them had kind of guessed. Because when I went back to Brighton, I hadn't been back since before the pandemic. And I went back this year, so 2024. And a couple, because I did a show every year for 5 years before the pandemic as well. I did a different comedy show every year. And I went with the production company, which was, one of them was gay. Amy from Lamb Productions, she asked me to go and do the Fringe this year as well. And a couple of other friends who were gay came to the show and said, oh, everyone's talking about you, now you're a lesbian or something. Which I thought was quite... It was quite funny. I was like, who's talking about me? They're like, oh, we're talking about you, now you're a lesbian.
In like an excited way or in a like,
Yeah, they were very
excited.
excited. Yeah, I don't know, but I think they were very excited. It's so funny, isn't it, how I just had my blinkers up the whole time. I was like, I feel safe in this space and I feel safe performing to these people. And now I'm like, oh, it makes sense. It all makes sense now because you feel like you belong to this community.
And you never had any glimmers.
I always said with my ex, I remember telling a couple of friends, oh, if this doesn't work out, I'm going to just date women. I think I was doing it to kind of test what that would sound like coming from me.
What, test how it would feel when you said it, or test how people would respond to you saying it?
A bit above, yeah. Because I was still like, oh, it's the person that you fall in love with. I never know what kind of person I'll fall in love with. But it's so like, I've done so much thinking. All these questions that you're firing at me are brilliant because they're all little things I've thought about too. Like, why didn't I see it? Or why didn't I do that? I think I didn't really know who I was as a person as well. The acting diploma really helped my confidence, and doing comedy helped my confidence. And then I started to get a voice, and then I realized like there was something even on stage that didn't feel authentic. And now that I am gay and I can go on stage and talk about that and joke about it, I feel so authentic. And it's really opened up my writing and my comedy and the way I perform. And my nana died a couple of years ago, and I just feel so relieved that I could tell her that. She might have gone behind my back and slagged me off. I don't know.
But I don't know. At least she was slagging off the real you.
Exactly. The authentic me. Get to know me and then don't like me, I would say to people.
There's something else as well that you said before that I just want to scratch out a bit more and maybe ask some follow-up questions. In terms of the shame and in terms of the not knowing yourself aspect of this story, you also talked about your northernness,
Yep.
yeah, and you talked about coming from a working class background, and that those things were all kind of layered upon one another, and those were all things that you were running away from.
Yeah. Because I went to the art school in Winchester, and I just wasn't myself. I tell my friends I think I had an alternative sliding moment life because I was always going to go to Lancaster art school and stay in the north. And instead I'd split up with a boyfriend or whatever, and he was in Preston, so I didn't want to be near that. So I went all the way, over 300 miles away. I had no support network, and I was already having mental health issues that weren't being addressed because we didn't have the conversational resources around that.
Yeah.
So I've had anxiety throughout my life. And again, is it because I had this piece of myself that I couldn't share?
Yeah.
It's interesting how the depression lifted when I came out. So yeah, being in Winchester, having no support network, not knowing who I was, dealing with mental health, being around people who have wealth and opportunities.
And it's really hard to explain this to anyone who doesn't live in the UK. But the north-south thing is really fucking weird.
Yeah, class-wise, because they taught, the accent and things like that. And I hate myself because I changed my accent to fit in.
Oh.
Even in Brighton, I had to really soften my accent. And now I'm back up here. I'm hoping I've got it back because I love it.
But yeah, there's this weird thing where people just understand class and
they think you're uneducated I think even my parents, if they're talking to someone who's from somewhere else or sounds a bit posh, they'll change their accent to talk to them. I mean, it's a natural thing that all humans do, apparently, to find like a middle ground.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really interesting. And again, a lot of shame around that. And now I kind of celebrate it because it's everything that makes me unique. The way I was brought up with certain things, and there's just so much character in it.
Yeah. But yeah, anyways, we've gone slightly off topic. But all of that is to say that there are all these layers and parts of your identity that you were encouraged not to feel shame about. Yeah,
even at the art school, kind of looked down on, and just from the way I talked and I just felt inferior and out of depth and didn't know who I was. And just, not having that support system of family and friends around. It's very interesting.
And so are you saying that your response to that was just to suppress everything that you thought people didn't like or weren't
Yeah.
interested in about you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think it was only when doing the acting diploma, because Jeanette, who runs the school, was like, Jane, you'd play like a northern willowy character. Because we had to lean into what made us special for our CVs. And then suddenly the northern accent becomes quite appealing. Do you know what I mean? You then, I could do that part or that part. But yeah, I just felt shameful because we didn't, at the time of me going to university and stuff, the art school, my parents, some situations happened where we didn't have money and I felt really out of my depth and self-esteem was very low. But then again, I wouldn't change anything because I've learned so much from every experience.
Yeah. But then that then cycles us back into the conversation about being in a relationship and feeling like, well, if I can't solve this for myself, someone else is definitely going to solve it for me. Let's go that way.
Exactly. Even straight friends, they date men and they have horrible experiences. And then I'm like, why do you want someone else in your life? Have you decided, what can someone else bring? They haven't even thought about that. They're just like, I need a boyfriend.
Half the rent.
Half the council tax needs paying.
I thought we all agreed. I thought we all knew.
Yeah. When I left Brighton, I left because I didn't want to do my full-time job anymore. It's making me miserable. And I wanted to pursue comedy. And I started doing comedy workshops with women and LGBTQI plus people. And I felt a lot of shame about moving in with my parents, mid-30s. I think it was my cousin. He said, well, that's the Lake District is where all the artists lived. All the poets and authors and creative people. And I was like, yeah, actually, yeah. And I think I've changed what I value as well. Like this village, I used to feel like it was a prison and nothing was happening. And now I'm like, it's absolutely gorgeous. We're on the coast. We've got the moors, we've got mountains, we've got forests. I can just walk 5 minutes and I'm in a forest alone. And I really like myself. People can't understand how I've been single for all this time and I like my own company. But I do. Yeah. I love it.
Oh, that's a really nice place to be. Do you waver on that? Sorry, I'm going to negative spaces. How about we pick at this gap?
Do I waver?
Yeah, because I think I like myself. No, I said that really definitively, didn't I? Like, I think I like myself. But there are some days when I am like, yeah, you're a bit of an idiot.
But that's good. That's fine. You learn, you make mistakes, you learn from them, you learn about yourself and who you are going forward.
But is that the same thing as not liking yourself for a day?
I don't know. This feels like a conversation for your therapist, if I'm honest.
Okay,
joking.
sorry.
But no, I've made silly decisions over the last few years, but I've been like, there's no point in beating myself up about it. Just move on, move forward. You know that about yourself now, or you know not to do that thing because that makes you feel a certain way. But I think having comedy, during the pandemic, I couldn't do comedy. I couldn't do stand-up. So when last year I moved to Manchester for 9 months and I just did stand-up comedy and I took every little gig, every tiny little gig, wherever it was in the Northwest, played in some very interesting places, just to build my confidence and build my skills up again. And that makes me feel so happy. I know I love comedy so much. I found my thing. I struggled with what I wanted to do with my life throughout teenage 20s. And now I'm like, oh, it's comedy. And so that keeps me on track. It gives me something to focus on. But yeah.
Okay. So we talked about the first time that you went to Indigo Club. Do you remember the last time you went?
Yeah, the last time it was a Halloween one, which I really enjoyed because I used to have a comedy character who was quite creepy. She was a children's author who hated children. And I had like my scary doll, Amy, she's over there. But I'd have Amy with me. And yeah, I had on like these weird sequin, I don't know what I was dressed as. Yeah, I think, yeah, it was a Halloween. Halloween is my favorite time of year anyway. I'm obsessed with it. And yeah, it was just really fun. And it was somebody's birthday. So we were making a big fuss of her. Gemma, she was called. Yeah, and it was just amazing. And again, just a great vibe. And it's like a secret little club kind of thing. It was really nice. And then again, the disco and face painting and Halloween costumes. And then I think it kind of just ceased to exist because of the pandemic. And then Hannah brought it back for a while, but she hasn't really done it for a bit. But yeah.
And so I think you maybe already told me this, but I'm going to ask anyway. What do you think having access to the Indigo Club taught you about yourself?
It taught me that there could be a space where I could just be myself. Even if I didn't quite know who that person was, I could still perform, do comedy. I could be comfortable in my skin. There's a thing that I've noticed, which I didn't really think of at the time, but the male gaze, the straight male gaze, G-A-Z-E, not male gaze. The gaze of straight men.
The male gaze is woof.
It's all their fault, no. As a woman, I'm 6 foot and I'm blonde, blue-eyed. So growing up, that's a type where men, not to sound big-headed, but I'd get attention from men that I didn't necessarily want. Because I'm huge. I'm like a Viking. So I remember at this Halloween one, the last ever Indigo Club, I was wearing something really silly. And I'd put on a little bit of weight because I was happy. And I remember thinking it doesn't matter. But if I'd performed in front of men, I would have felt very self-conscious about my body. And that's something I've noticed over the last few years as well, how freeing it is to not dress for the male gaze. And not have a body. I kind of hide bits of myself, but I feel more comfortable. I wear a suit when I do stand-up, for example. It's interesting. I don't know if that answers your question or I've gone off on a tangent.
No, that is interesting. But I think the only lesson here is we need to get rid of all the men.
Straight men.
Oh, I don't know. Gay men are pretty terrible as well.
Gay men love my stand-up.
Oh, okay, they can stay.
They can stay. They get my jokes.
Okay, that is us for yet another week. Thank you for joining us. If you loved this chat as much as I did, then why not go and give Jane some love on socials? I will share all the links in the show notes for this episode, so you don't need to remember anything off the top of your head, but just in case you have a really good memory, I will say what her handles are anyway. She can be found on TikTok and Instagram at Jane Does Comedy. And on top of that, a quick reminder that she also has her own podcast, All the Terrible Things, a paranormal queer comedy podcast, which can be found wherever you stream podcasts. If you're not already following me on socials, I'm on TikTok and Instagram as Lost Spaces Pod, and I would love to say hello to you on either of those platforms. Right. Hope you have a good day. Thank you very much for joining us once again. I will see you next Wednesday.